He reckons this is as good as he's seen it, yeah. I've never seen it, so much floodwater around, no.
Oh, gosh.
So I've been here, I'm nearly 50, so I've been here since I was, all my life, yeah.
Mackenzie District Council is urging people not to tamper with road signs put in place to mark closures and flood-affected areas. The council's been receiving reports of people removing road cones and road closed signs. It says the public, contractors and staff are being put at risk and they need to be returned immediately. The council says some may have been moved to allow people to check out flooded areas. Travellers are being urged to stay off the road as there may be washouts or other significant damage under the road. A police union president says being assaulted is not just part of the job, following a vicious attack on a female officer in South Auckland on Monday. The female officer was punched square in the face by the offender, who was then tasered and apprehended by fellow officers. Police Association President Chris Cahill questions how officers can protect the public when they aren't protected themselves.
Unfortunately, assaults like this aren't rare. There was more than 2,000 officers assaulted last year alone, and numerous of them are of this severity or even worse on occasion.
Chris Cahill says video of the attack reveals to New Zealanders the atrocious level of violence police face on a daily basis. The way COVID-19 deaths are recorded is changing. The Ministry of Health will now provide figures on cases where the virus was the underlying or a contributing cause of death. It'll continue to separately publish deaths where someone had a COVID-19 infection in the past 28 days. Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says the ministry has had the capability to report deaths this way for some months now.
One of the reasons we're shifting the reporting now is that the WHO has changed its request of us in terms of our reporting. And secondly, we also just wanted to give plenty of notice about why we were doing it.
The change in reporting shows that COVID-19 was the underlying or contributing cause for between 2/3 and 3/4 of people who died within 28 days of an infection. Keen skiers and snowboarders are spending their time at the local cafes as Mount Ruapehu keeps missing out on snow this winter. The school holidays are in full swing and there are a lot of visitors around, but Whakapapa and Tūroa haven't got enough snow to get their chairlifts going yet. So far, only the beginner slopes are open on both ski fields. Tūroa ski area manager Johan Bergman says they've got some artificial snow to get them through while they wait for the real version.
So we've got some man-made snow down there at the moment, which is great. The punters are loving that.
Snow is forecast tomorrow, raising hopes for the rest of the season. To sport, and Black Caps fast bowler Lockie Ferguson was at his best as he helped his side to a 31-run win over Ireland in the opening T20 International in Belfast this morning. Ferguson mixed up his deliveries with fast balls and change-ups and finished with the impressive figures of 4 for 14 from the 3.2 overs. He admits it took a little while to adjust to the Stormont wicket.
I play on some services and they don't give me a lot of pace, so today after about a few and the Irish are getting pretty easy on the front foot, I had to change things up a bit and managed to get a bit of purchase of the wicket, so that came out today nicely. I'm not sure what will happen next game, but that's part of the fun, but yeah, certainly pleased with how today went.
Meanwhile, England Test captain Ben Stokes has announced he's quitting one-day cricket, saying playing all 3 formats of the game has taken a toll on his body. Ireland prop Andrew Porter has been cited for a high tackle on All Black Brodie Retallick during his side's Test Series clinching win in Wellington on Saturday night. Retallick suffered a fractured cheekbone and is expected to be sidelined for at least 6 weeks. Auckland sprinter Georgia Hulls has finished 6th in her 200-metre heats at the World Champs in Eugene, Oregon, failing to advance to the next round. And Games organisers have announced the opening ceremony of the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles will be held on July 14th and the Games will conclude on July 30th. The LA 28 Paralympic Games will kick off on August 15th and close August 27th. That's the news.
It's blowing.
Definitely has been a wild night. Most of the impacts to date have been linked to strong winds. We've had widespread power outages due to vegetation and debris dropping lines.
And it's raining.
The Ashburton River is certainly roaring.
Just so much rain in the hills around those townships.
We are swimming here and the water levels rising.
There's still a lot of water running down a couple of streets here in the village. One of the residents had water lapping at the side of his brand new house, and I know of 4 that have got water going through them.
Covering our climate, Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Rain or showers and thunderstorms possible today. Showers tomorrow. From Waikato to Taranaki, also Bay of Plenty, Taumaru Nui and Taupo. Rain or showers, thunderstorms possible in Taranaki until dawn tomorrow. No mention of snow here, but apparently it is on the way. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Taihape, Whanganui and Manawatu. High cloud today. Periods of rain tomorrow with heavy falls in Gisborne. From Horowhenua to Wellington, showers turning to rain from the evening. Strong or gale nor'westerlies easing this afternoon. Bulla, Nelson, Westland and Marlborough except for the Kaikoura coast. Periods of rain with some heavy falls, clearing from southern Westland tomorrow. For the Kaikoura coast and for Canterbury, periods of rain easing to drizzle this evening, rains returning tomorrow evening and snows lowering to 600 metres inland. Fiordland, Southland and Otago, scattered rain or drizzle, especially north of Dunedin today, clearing from Fiordland tomorrow. And for Ruapehu, the Chatham Islands, often cloudy, rains developing tomorrow night. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll update you with the latest headlines and any traffic news at about 20 past 5.
Nā mihi Evie, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Torrential rain in Otago and Canterbury has forced homeowners and holidaymakers to evacuate, with floodwaters rushing through several small towns. The raging Ashburton and Rakaia rivers have burst their banks in places, flooding paddocks and roads and putting civil defence on high alert. Jean Edwards reports.
Streets have been turned into rivers in Omarama and Otimatata in the Mackenzie country, where people have had to flee to higher ground. Otimatata civil defence volunteer Brent Cowles says half a dozen homes have flooded. An elderly couple had to leave when water started running through their kitchen, lounge and bedroom.
We got them into a nice dry place at the hotel and made sure that they're warm. They'll be probably a week before they'll get back to their house, I guess. By the time carpets are dried, it's still raining quite heavily now.
He says people can't remember anything like it.
I don't think anyone's seen it the way this is. I mean, the whole golf course, I'm just looking at it now. I mean, it's like a pool.
The Omarama Top 10 holiday park also went under, forcing 50 campers to evacuate. Owner Erwin Babor says almost half of the units have water damage.
We have 2 units that they definitely need new carpet, and there's 1 unit is basically turned sideways. It's been pushed off of its foundation, and the rest we have not been able to access yet.
Raging floodwaters have also cut off access to Mount Cook and Lake Ohau near Twizel. Norm Mackay says there's a gaping hole where there was once a bridge, trapping holidaymakers.
The bridge has completely been cut in half. You could not get across. The distance between one side of the bridge to the other would be, I'd say, about 30, 40 feet, gone completely.
He says his weather station has recorded 240 millimetres of rain in the last 3 days.
We're used to extreme weather here, especially high winds. We're used to snow in the winter, and we're used to very hot temperatures, 40 degrees in the summer, but we have never in 30 years here seen as much rain in such a short period of time.
Mount Cook Village recorded 411 millimetres of rain in the 24 hours to 8 o'clock this morning. John Anderson is a fourth-generation farmer at Benomar Station near Omarama, which now resembles a lake.
We farm down the north side of the Ohau River and it's burst its banks and we've got quite a lot of flat going down towards the head of Lake Benmore and it's all underwater.
He had already moved stock to higher ground but is facing a big clean-up.
It's just going to be a big mess. Fences, tracks, culverts are all chocker and moved. Yeah, just a big mess to tidy up.
Further north, Civil Defence in Canterbury is dealing with a number of road closures caused by flooding from Ashburton River, which has burst its banks in places. But the Ashburton Mayor, Neil Brown, says the town won't flood when the river peaks later this evening.
It's peaked up in the foothills, and we're just waiting for that peak of water to come through the township, through the river. The risk of flooding in the Ashburton Township is very, very low. The stop banks that protect the town are very good, and they will not be breached in this event.
While a lot of paddocks have flooded, he's expecting about half the volume of water in the river compared to last May's flood.
Up country, we've had some breaches of some stop banks and water has come out of the river in some places, nowhere near the extent it came out and the damage it caused last time.
Slips are blocking a number of roads, including the Lindis Pass between Omarama and Terrace, which will be closed until at least tomorrow. The Central Otago Council has told residents of Ophir, Ida Valley and Galloway to go home as river levels rise, potentially threatening key roads.
As New Zealand grapples with a new surge of Omicron, the Director-General of Health has offered some gentle advice to anyone planning events over the next 6 weeks. He's suggesting postponing, if possible, until the worst has passed, or at least thinking very carefully about what measures can be put in place to keep people safe. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
And that is that. The big events are back. The buzz, the booze. It's almost like pre-COVID. Except for all the COVID. Today brought more than 10,000 new cases as a fresh wave of Omicron crashes across the country. And unlike the last surge, there are no gathering limits this time. Officials don't think they'd make much difference. Indeed, Ashley Bloomfield himself was at the rugby over the weekend.
I was yelling instructions loudly at the All Blacks on Saturday night, and quite clearly, even though I'm finishing at the end of next week, I will not be in the running for the All Black coaching job.
The games are outside, the risk of spread low, but Dr Bloomfield is taking extra precautions. His formal farewell tonight has been scaled right back, with most attending by Zoom and no food or drink.
We've cancelled karaoke.
His goodbye party next week has been put on ice as well, pushed back until later this year, once the COVID wave has passed.
From my perspective, this is not the time for us to be doing those things. We know that they're the sorts of events that people are likely to spread COVID.
And others are taking similar action. The Green Party has called off its annual conference planned for this weekend and will instead meet virtually. The National Radio Awards, set for Thursday evening, has also been brought online.
This is the time, it's this next 6 weeks as we go through winter. If there are things that can be deferred, this might be a good period when to just defer those to later in the year.
Hospitality New Zealand has its own conference coming up this month. Jamie Freeman heads up the group's Auckland branch. He believes organisers should press ahead with events on the condition attendees must stay home if they're unwell.
Don't let life stop. With your bookings, for example, book them in, and if there is people that have got symptoms or get COVID, they won't come to the event. You can't sort of stop moving forward. You need to socialise, I believe.
And the current rules allow that. Dr Bloomfield says if organisers do push on, they should consider ventilation and mask use to keep people safe. Most importantly, he says, if people do have any COVID-19 symptoms, the age-old rule remains. Stay home.
It's 14 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And returning to the story about flooding in the South Island, the bridge into Lake Ohau near Mount Cook has been washed out, meaning there's no way in or out of the village. Lake Ohau Lodge owner Mike Nielsen joins us now. Kia ora, Mike. Have you eyeballed the bridge? Can you give us an idea what it looks like?
Yes, I got close to it this morning and then took a diversion across country and got into Twizel to pick up our housekeepers and a bunch of laundry and came back the same way. So I circumnavigated the disaster area.
So nothing stops Mike. Hey, the bridge itself, what does it look like?
Well, it's just a small country type of bridge in the sense that it's actually culvert with metal over the top, yeah.
And now what, gaping hole in the middle?
Yeah. The council seem confident they should be able to deal with it fairly quickly, yeah.
So in terms of you've managed to obviously get the staff in that you need. When you say you took a bit of a back route, can you be a bit more specific?
Yes, I went down to a farmhouse area and then cut across a paddock to get to the main road to Twizel, yeah.
Yeah, and you were able to bring staff and what, supplies back or?
Laundry, yeah.
Laundry. How many people have you got staying with you at the moment?
About 130 at the moment.
That's a good number. So how are they feeling about, they'll be staying with you a bit longer, won't they, Mike?
Well, yes and no. Most of them were staying at school holidays, and so most of them were staying for a period of time anyway. And unfortunately, this school holidays, we've had lots of snow, but not so many fine days for skiing. So, I guess have spent quite a bit of time in the lodge instead of out skiing this school holidays.
What does it mean for the village having that bridge out in practical terms?
The village, the village is mostly people that are staying in holiday homes, and I guess they're a bit on holiday, so they're not too fussed at the moment. I guess when it's time to get back to work, that's when they'll be more concerned, but I guess everyone is at the moment accepting that in a few days' time it will change again.
What's the deal with food supplies and things like that?
Well, we have freezers and so on here. We only order once a week anyway, and we're set up to run for 7 days, 10 days at a time. Yeah.
And will you be doing the staff run again tomorrow, taking people back and forth?
Well, no, we're going to keep them in rooms here tonight to save that business.
Yeah, and what's the weather like out your window?
Well, it has stopped raining, which is wonderful. It's been very heavy rain for the last 48 hours. I don't know if it was 48, but it was roughly 2 days. And it has stopped, and everyone was waiting for that, including the roading people, because without that break in the weather, they really couldn't start attacking the repairs. Yeah.
So what's going in there, do you know? Are they talking about a Bailey Bridge or...?
No, they're talking about putting rock material over the culverts, which are still there apparently.
Okay. Hey, Lake Ohau's taken a bit of a pounding in recent years, hasn't it? Yeah. So
What's
just
up?
Another hurdle, Mike, or what?
Was it something I did when I was a kid or what?
You seem pretty relaxed, though, about the whole situation. How are you viewing it?
Well, it has been hard at times, but this is just one of our normal experiences at Ohau. The weather in terms of snow and rain and slips and so on. The fire was something which was awful. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Hey, stay dry and best of luck for the next few days. That is Mike Nielsen, who's from the Lake Ohau Lodge. As you heard there, cut off, but he's taken a cross-country route to make sure he's got the housekeeping staff and the supplies to carry on there with all his guests. Now, for those in the area, it's worth noting State Highway 8, the Lindis Pass, will remain closed overnight with fresh snow falling in several areas of slips and flooding. Waka Kotahi says people are best to delay travel until tomorrow and then check their routes. There are a number of local council managed road closures in place, so people need to check their council Facebook pages and updates as well. It's a lack of snow that's meant a slightly rocky start for the North Island ski season and the businesses it supports. Mount Ruapehu's two main ski fields are still lying largely barren, awaiting a thorough snow dump before they can fully open. Reporter Katie Todd and camera operator Marika Habazi went for a visit.
July in Ohakuni, the school holidays are in full swing, and visitors of all ages are in town, lured by the country's largest ski field, Whakapapa, its neighbouring ski field Turoa, and the small club ski field Tukino. But they're arriving to find one thing missing. What brings you to Ohakuni?
Skiing trip? Yes, skiing trip.
And have you made it onto the mountain?
No.
Why is that?
Enough snow.
We're here for the skiing. That was predominantly the reason. Try and teach these guys how to ski and whatnot. But not so good up there at the moment.
So you haven't made it up?
I know we've tried twice. We tried Whakapapa yesterday, Turoa today, to go on the beginner slopes, but it's jam-packed for the people. Windy as hell today, and there's a desperate lack of snow.
My 13-year-old wants to go and play in the snow, but it doesn't look like that's possibly going to be happening.
There just hasn't been enough snowfall yet to fully blanket Ruapehu's volcanic rock. That means while the chairlifts were due to start turning 10 days ago, only the beginner slopes, Turoa's Alpine Meadow and Whakapapa's Happy Valley, are operating, along with one rope tow at Club Field Tukino. The scenes at Turoa speak for themselves. While some South Island ski fields are enjoying snow bases of up to 180 centimetres, here the snow base is closer to 3 centimetres. Early season snow that fell in June was washed off the mountain by rain. Turoa Ski Area Manager Johan Bergman says in the right humidity and temperatures, crews can use giant snow guns to coat the ground in artificial snow.
So we've got some man-made snow down there at the moment, which is great. The punters are loving that.
And it's certainly helping keep the business ticking over while they wait for more to fall. About 5,000 people visited the 2 large ski fields on the weekend for sightseeing and beginner runs.
Oh, we're on the side of a mountain, so we're always up against the weather, but we're a hardy bunch of people here, so we get out there and do the mahi when we can, yeah.
But some hospitality businesses say getting a good snow base and opening the big slopes is a matter of urgency. Ruapehu Mountain Motel and Lodge co-owner Lee Berry fears a continued lack of snow will see tourists venture to the South Island instead, costing the local economy.
Last year was disaster. We had that big lockdown in the middle of August, which was our prime time. Beautiful hot, bluebird days and powder snow, and no one from Auckland could come and play on it. And it was, we had 300 unit nights cancel immediately because of that. So that was just basically all our income.
She says 2 tough years have taken their toll.
There'll be a lot of people who'll be hurting really hard, A lot of people, we're resilient. We've got through COVID last couple of years, but there's a lot that just really put their faith into having this season be the way of keeping going, really.
For now, TCB ski board and bike founder Mike Wiggins says visitors are sticking around town, some swapping out skis and snowboards for 2-wheeled alternatives.
We've had untold bikers going out every morning and every day, and it's nice weather, so they're enjoying it as well.
There is a sprinkling of snow in the forecast tomorrow, and he's keeping a sense of optimism about the snow season ahead.
We've been doing a snow dance at night so that it will come, but it's a little bit late, but it will come.
Johan Bergman says another 20 or 30 centimetres of snow is all that's needed to get grooming machines on the mountain and get ski season properly underway.
23 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. If you were listening to that one on radio, you can check out the video from Marika and Katie's story there. Pretty remarkable to see the slopes sans snow. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. If you're in an area that's having a bit of a weather washout, love to know what's going on there. Do text us, let us know your location. Are you on holiday? Are you caught, stuck or having to evacuate? 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Also interested in your thoughts there from the Director General of Health, saying if you've got a big event coming up, postpone it if you can. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ko Ewe anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. Torrential rain in Otago and Canterbury has forced homeowners and holidaymakers to evacuate, with floodwaters rushing through several small towns. Canterbury civil defence teams are also monitoring the raging Ashburton and Rakaia rivers. Meanwhile, a sheep and beef farmer near Omarama says he's waiting for the extent of the damage to be revealed after the nearby Ahuriri River burst its banks overnight. He says he's never seen a flood like this. The 7-day rolling average of COVID-19 cases, deaths and hospitalisations have all increased. There are 10,772 new COVID-19 cases. 21 people have died and there have been 788 hospitalisations. The Director General of Health says the increase in cases is driven by the more contagious BA5 subvariant. Violence has erupted in parts of Papua New Guinea amid widespread public discontent at election irregularities. Citizens say they've been denied the right to vote because outdated electoral rolls don't include their names. A police union president says courts need to send a clear message about protecting officers following a brazen and vicious assault on a female officer in South Auckland. The officer was punched in the face in the suburb of Manurewa on Monday. And severe weather warnings remain in place for Samoa after huge sea swells flooded coastal areas of the eastern and south side of the country. Conditions are expected to ease by the weekend. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland on State Highway 1, a breakdown near the southbound Green Lane off-ramp was blocking the right southbound lane. It's now been cleared, but expect delays there. In the South Island, the main road at Stoke Nelson is closed because of flooding near Kerry Marshall Drive. State Highway 6 is still open, but it's slow going because of that detour. State Highway 8 at Lindis Pass is closed, and State Highway 77 between Blackford Road and Mount Hutt Station Road is closed. That won't change for the next couple of days, apparently. Those are the headlines and traffic. I'll have more of that at about 5:40.
Kia ora rā iho. A group of would-be homeowners left out of pocket after their builder went bust are planning legal action against the Master Builders Association over guarantees they thought they'd signed and paid for. The families say they completed applications for guarantees through the association that would entitle them to non-completion or lost deposit payouts. But the builder never lodged them with Master Builders. And now a lawyer for the group says the association won't honour the guarantees despite doing so in a previous similar case. Ian Stevenson says his clients trusted the Master Builders brand.
A lot of people rely on that. And there seems to be a disconnect between that level of trust and, in fact, the real assurance that Master Builders are actually giving. There has been a situation in the past where they have paid out on a guarantee, and that was the gentleman Mark Gumbrell a year or so ago. The question here is, will they try and reassure consumers about the brand by also making a payout on this one, even though it's 20 owners instead of one?
OK, let's go back a little bit. What happened with the people that you represent? They thought they had guarantees. So what process did they go through? Did they pay up? Did they do the documents? How did it work?
Yeah, that's right. So they did do the documents. They filled them in. They paid the deposit or the fee for the guarantee over to the builder. Of course, that's a small fraction of what they were going to pay the builder, so you can understand why they wouldn't feel any sense of concern in doing that. And the builder just simply never passed it on. And of course, some would say, as Master Builders do, well, we put a clause on our contract that says 14 days after you've submitted, if you haven't heard from us, then you need to follow it up. But of course, they're relying on Master Builders as or rather the builder themselves to follow it through as what they would see to be an agent of Master Builders. So they don't see any distinction or disconnect between the two organisations. And of course, in some of these instances, we're dealing with people who may not be that au fait, that sophisticated when it comes to the contracting process. And let's face it, builders are generally good chaps, are good people. So they generally feel that they can trust that person.
So these people who were getting houses built paid the insurance fees, they fill out all the relevant forms, and they forwarded them on to the builder, and they were under the impression that they had gone on to Master Builders, who basically control the guarantee. But that didn't happen.
Well, that's right. The question is, why would they think otherwise? They'd given their documents, they'd given the money to their builder, whom they trusted, hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million in contract price to that person. They would assume that if there was going to be any issues with the guarantee, that the builder, who they have a relationship with, would tell them.
How many people are you dealing with, and do you think there's more out there?
Well, I'm dealing with 20 in terms of the Jonesy construction liquidation. I've already been contacted by others who are interested in looking at whether or not they could join in some form of action. So it's broader, and of course, in my experience, it's not an unusual occurrence. I don't think Master Builders would say it was an unusual occurrence. It's obviously not commonplace per se, but it isn't unusual.
Well, if it's not unusual, doesn't that indicate that there is a fault in the system? Why don't they pay straight to master builders? Wouldn't that make it easier? Like lodging a bond or something, so you know that it's actually gone through and you are covered?
Yeah, exactly. It's a good question. Why don't they do that? Is it a question of administrative burden, that they'd prefer that administrative burden to be on the builder? They could quite easily require this, and of course, these have been issues raised over quite some time. Gordon Harcourt's report on this issue in 2016. MB review through the Kovic report in 2018. There are issues around this, and issues around the fact that, I suppose you're going back to the question, yes, why don't they? I can't see a good reason, unless it's a question of wanting to avoid administrative burden.
At the same time, Ian, people will be wondering, houses are usually a person's biggest investment in their lifetime. Why on earth wouldn't your clients check that they actually had cover?
Yeah, that's right. And it's a question of the trust that people put in the building fraternity, because builders, as I say, are generally good people. They come across as sort of salt of the earth, and a lot of them just feel like they can trust them. I'm also concerned in relation to Jonesy Construction, a significant number of these people are Indian migrant families. And that's a concern to me around, what kind of assistance or advice they're getting. Now, it might be that people would say, well, you should look after yourself. You've caused your own loss. But master builders are the number one trade association offering a guarantee in this country. People look at it and they trust it.
If they had this, what would they be covered for? And without it, how much out of pocket are all these people?
So it's around 20% of the build price that you're covered for when you're dealing with a insolvency and a non-completion, up to a value of about $500,000 from memory. So it's a significant chunk of change. I mean, master builders often will, like any sort of insurance claim, they would push back on how much they have to pay, but it's quite significant.
So, Ian, if you can't negotiate your way out of this with master builders, what goes to court?
Yeah, well, if that's the last resort. Again, Mark Gumbrell was one person. This is 20, possibly with a bunch more coming in. So ultimately, I'm very interested in the idea of whether there's a Fairer Trading Act claim. Certainly raised a question with the Commerce Commission. And alongside that, is there potentially a novel duty of care owed by trade associations when they make the kind of representations as to quality that master builders have?
And that's the lawyer for the homeowners there, Ian Stevenson. It is 27 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And this time of the night means it's time for business. Ko taku hoa inaine ko Nicholas Poynton, who is in the studio. Kia ora, Nicholas. Okay, let's start with an implosion of the board of the listed car retailer, New Zealand Automotive Investments. Who are they? What's going on?
Yeah, look, this is the type of drama around the boardroom table that would make great fodder for a TV program. But NZ Automotive...
I think it's called Succession, but anyway, carry on.
There you go, yeah. So NZ Automotive Investments, people may know them as the company that owns the used car retail chain, Too Cheap Cars. They also have an associated finance company, quite a small operation. They listed on the NZX just over a year ago without much fanfare, but they did make a splash this morning when they put out an announcement to the NZX that 4 of its directors had resigned, and it included one of the company's founders and major shareholders. And they cited what they called, and I quote, a fundamental breakdown of trust and confidence and irreconcilable differences that have arisen between them and the company's remaining director and major shareholder, a fellow by the name of David Senna. And this all was over the way that the company was managed and governed. And they said that Senna, Mr. Mr. Sena had given them notice that he planned to move against 3 of the existing directors at the company's upcoming annual shareholders meeting by nominating 3 other directors to potentially replace them. Unfortunately, none of these resigning directors would speak to us or give us any further detail about what was the basis of this disagreement that led them to resign. But look, these aren't the only departures that this company's had this year. Early in the year, their former chair and another director resigned abruptly, gave no reason. Earlier this month, the company's chief executive, been in the role for less than 2 years, says he's going to be leaving in September. So there has been quite the exodus within the company. The only person who would answer questions was David Sena. And he said the reason why he's looked to replace the current directors is because they don't have the skills or the experience to come up with strategy to turn around the company's poor performance or take advantage of opportunities in the used car market. He says that if we look at some of the challenges the company's faced, they import most of their cars from Japan. They've been hit by supply chain disruptions and also foreign exchange hedges that have moved against them. All of that has created numerous headwinds for the company. Its share price has halved. That spurred Mr. Sena to decide that the company needed a shake-up. So next month's annual shareholders meeting, probably going to be a doozy, one to watch. But today's announcement, everything that happened to the company, share price down 27% to 47 cents per share.
Interesting. Okay, let's go to Sky TV. It is zeroing in on securing the Rugby World Cup broadcasting rights. Do people still want to watch it?
Well, yeah.
After the weekend?
That's a great question. I'm sure people, a lot of consumers and a lot of people listening have mixed feelings about Sky TV and their product offering and how much you have to pay for it. But they did confirm speculation that they are in advanced discussions. That's the line they gave us with World Rugby, not only to secure the broadcasting rights to next year's World Cup, but also a handful of other top-flight rugby competitions. Spark Sport, they're the ones who streamed the competition back in 2019. That was a real win for the company, snatching it from Sky TV. Didn't want to speak to us today, referred all comments to World Rugby. Speaking to Jarden's head of research, Ari Decker, he was off the view that this would be a win for Sky if they could secure these rights, but not necessarily a major loss if they didn't, because he was off the view that these rights, they only come up every 4 years, and they don't necessarily draw in the long-term subscriptions from customers like Super Rugby or the English Premier League or the NRL. But on the flip side, he says if Spark loses this, it could be the nail in the coffin for Spark Sport, because this won't be the only streaming right it loses if it loses it. They've also lost the Premier League to Sky. I think there was either in the past year as well. And he's sort of calling into question the investment basis or the investment rationale behind Spark Sport, because Spark's been quite secretive about how profitable it's been in the past, saying that the whole rationale behind it for them was that it was about bundling services, creating an attractive customer offering. If you can pull people into Spark Sport, you can maybe sell them phone plans and a broadband deal as well. The market reaction to this was quite interesting. Sky, unsurprisingly, share price up 3.5% to $2.39 per share, but Spark up 2 cents as well. Investors didn't seem to take this as a major loss.
Well, viewers will want to know if they're going to get charged more if they do get the Rugby World Cup
Unfortunately, Sky didn't answer our questions today, so
all right,
we'll find out in due course.
Let's blitz the markets. Nicholas, what do you got?
The NZX was flat today. You could say it lifted 0.9 points to 11,163. The dollar trading at 61.7 US cents, 90.2 Australian, and 51.6 pence.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton there with Business News. The winter chill is still with us, and property inspectors are urging landlords to ensure their rentals are warm and dry. Compliance with healthy home standards is still lagging more than 2 years since the law took effect. Advocates say it's leaving renters powerless as they get stuck in drafty, mouldy homes amid rental shortages. Louise Tanuth reports.
Since July last year, all boarding houses and private landlords need to ensure their rental properties meet healthy home standards within 90 days of any new or renewed tenancies. From July 2024, all rentals must comply. The standards are for heating, insulation, ventilation, moisture and drainage, and draft stopping in a home. Matt Mason's the CEO at Better Property Compliance, which carries out healthy home inspections. The company's been tracking the level of compliance throughout the country. He says while things like insulation are passing, there are reoccurring areas of concern.
So things like draft stopping, that, we only had a 46% pass rate on that across the country on average, which is, 1 in every 2 properties only past that.
He says about 2/3 of properties passed the drainage and guttering check. After an initial rush of property management firms getting up to date, he says it's now private landlords scrambling as new tenancies begin. But that's causing some problems.
We're getting a lot of feedback from the market that they are struggling to comply in time due to the shortages and supply issues with getting things like heat pumps or insulation or moisture barriers or draft stops.
Adam Gordon's the co-founder of home testing group All Clear. He's seeing the same issues. Their data shows just 57% of homes they've assessed were compliant with all 5 healthy home requirements. He says landlords urgently need to get on top of things and not rely on their tenants staying put.
So we've seen a lot of owners thinking that 2024 is the end date. As long as that tenancy doesn't end between now and 2024, they've got all that time to remain to reach compliance. The reality is no one really knows when a tenancy will end.
He says there also needs to be more enforcement on private rentals.
Relatively poor education in the market around, direct to private landlords, and there's a lot of people that have simply put their head in the sand.
Renters United spokesperson Annie Baikova says with rental shortages in many parts of the country, it's become a lottery which landlords decide to comply with the standards or not.
It's pretty much in the hands of the tenant to go to the tenancy tribunal and start this big legal fuss about it, because there isn't somebody that they could just sort of report it to that would investigate it without their full involvement.
And that puts a lot on the line for people who need somewhere to live.
We've even heard sort of anecdotal stories of landlords and property management companies having sort of blacklists of tenants that complain or that are likely to bring up issues. That's really, really concerning and would definitely deter some tenants from speaking out, I would think.
Head of Property Management at the Real Estate Institute, Joanne Ray's adamant landlords are making progress.
Most of the property management organisations that we deal with are reporting back that they're at least 70% of the way through. So there's been a real focus on completing the work.
In 2 years, landlords that don't meet their obligations under the Healthy Home Standards are in breach of the Residential Tenancies Act. They may be liable for damages of up to $7,200, but only if tenants go to the tribunal.
18 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or Whakaaro, would love your feedback on that one. Is your rental warm and dry? Have you got heating? Does the price reflect the quality? Let us know. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the headlines now. Ko Ewe anō tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. Some South Island highways will remain closed overnight with fresh snow falling and several areas of slips and flooding. The Lindis and Haast passes, State Highway 8 between Omarama and Twizel, and the Aoraki Mount Cook Highway will remain closed. And motorists near Ashburton are urged to only travel if essential after flooding closed roads around mid-Canterbury. Civil Defence staff are closely monitoring the Ashburton River, which has overflowed its banks in places, but the Ashburton Mayor says the town won't flood when the river peaks later this evening. The way COVID-19 deaths are recorded is changing. The Ministry of Health will now provide figures on cases where the virus was the underlying or a contributing cause of death. It'll continue to separately publish deaths where someone had a COVID-19 infection in the past 28 days. The National Party says the $44 million the government is giving to councils to help them transition to the new Three Waters model is a desperate bribe. The reforms shift drinking, waste and stormwater management from 67 councils to 4 mega entities. In Spain, temperatures have hit a record 43 degrees and firefighters are tackling a large number of blazes. It's just one nation affected by a devastating heatwave sweeping across Europe. And searing summer temperatures are expected to return to parts of China this week, with extreme heat forecast to last much longer than usual through till late August. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, apart from those closures mentioned in the headlines, in Auckland there may be residual delays after Green Lane on State Highway 1 heading south because of an earlier breakdown. I'll have a full news bulletin for you and a short weather forecast at 6.
Ngā mihi e ho. You didn't steal from us, you stole from hungry families. That from a Southland charity fleeced of donations destined for struggling whānau. A large chest freezer and all the meat in it was swiped from a St Vincent de Paul property in Invercargill between July 6th and 7th. And to add insult to injury, they also pinched the charity's own van to make off with the donated spoils. Now police are warning locals to beware of black market meat deals. St Vincent de Paul volunteer Richard O'Connell reckons the whole thing is pretty off.
It's a bit on the nose, really. We are a completely volunteer organisation. In Invercargill, we put about 100,000 a year into Invercargill. We've been here for 90 years. And the people that have stolen this meat are not actually depriving us, they're depriving of families that probably needed it during the school holidays when the kids aren't getting lunches at school. And that's what we're in the process of doing this holiday. So also is a bit upsetting is the fact that, and I'm assuming this, that the people that actually broke into our shed, which is a furniture shed storing a lot of furniture, also stores our van for deliveries and collection, and also had a deep freeze full of meat in it. And to know what was there and to do what they've done, I suspect we've probably taken them to the shed previously.
So, Richard, it may have been someone that you helped out, actually.
We feel it may have been, yeah. I know it's a bit of an assumption, but how would they be so organised to know what they were doing coming in here, yes.
Talk us through what actually happened, what you know so far.
What we know so far is that they used a large jimmy bar to break into a side door of our furniture storage shed. And once inside, they took the controls, which opened the roller door. They stole our van by hot wiring it because the ignition has been pulled out. You can see that. And they also used a barrow that we have here for shifting furniture around to shift the deep freeze, which was full of meat. And they took that barrow with them, of course, because they obviously wanted to unload the deep freeze as well. And we didn't hear anything about it for a week. We reported to the police immediately. And then it did turn up in an obscure place, a place called Sandy Point, which was way down the bottom end of the estuary.
The van turned up there, right?
Yes, it did.
So
yes.
Just so I've got this right, they actually loaded the whole freezer stuffed full of meat into the back of the van?
Yes. They used our van to steal our freezer. Yes. We have a farming family always provides us with meat from a farm every year. There's a lot of mince because I tell you what, for a lot of families, a couple of kilos of mince goes a long way.
Yeah, and so you were giving this to people who really needed food in their bellies and on their tables, yeah?
That's right. Well, in a way, they robbed them. They actually didn't rob us, in a way. So we just proceeded. We've actually got a hire van here at the moment, but we got one of our members has got a van from his work, which we've used also, because we are shifting furniture one way or another almost daily. In fact, that's why I'm in the shed today. So
the loss of the van, you feel it pretty acutely, do you?
We'll get insurance, but insurance won't replace a van, but it'll be a good start. As I say, we run a reasonably successful operation here because we're all volunteers. There's no salaried income at all. That enables us to have a reasonable cash flow, but we certainly can't go losing a van regularly.
Nor a chest freezer and nor all the meat that was in it.
Right. The chest freezer was actually donated as well.
Even though they used your sack barrow, as I understand it,
that's exactly what it was, yes.
Yeah, to get the freezer into the back of your own van to take off with it. There must have been a few of them because that would have weighed a ton with frozen food in it.
I think it would take 4 people. I'm sure it would. But that's, once again, I'm only assuming things a bit, yeah.
What would your message be to anyone who knows what's gone on here, who's involved, and also if someone starts to offer you a cheap bit of mince or some other meat, what do you want to say about that, Richard?
Well, I think the police should be informed, really. If you do feel there's a lot of surprising amount of meat has already turned up in your neighbourhood or amongst your friends, you have to be suspicious, and the Invercargill police are the people to talk to.
I suppose the thing that they should know is it was actually, it was destined for families in need.
Yes.
And if they were in need, I'm sure you would have helped them out, Richard, wouldn't you?
Well, we were helping people at the weekend. We were delivering meat. In fact, I've got a text from somebody today wanting more, because I know that what the situation is, they're struggling. Yeah.
So tell me, on the back of this, obviously record inflation this week, how's the cost of living hitting people down there?
Well, it's the same thing. Food, well, the big one, of course, is rent, petrol, and food. They're the 3. And then there's kids with costs of schooling and all those kind of... We work in with 2 or 3 schools quite closely. There's no question about it. The cost of living is really affecting people. The one particular family we're dealing with at the weekend, they're only taking their kids to school about 2 to 3 days a week because they can't afford to petrol in their car. And that's the report we got from the school. About 40% of the time they attend school.
That's rough, Richard.
Yeah, so that's one of the impacts of the cost of living. Yeah.
And those are the people you're trying to help?
Well, that was one family we were actually out with within the last week or 10 days, yes.
Yeah, and then someone comes along and kneecaps you in this way.
Basically, yes. You know, the community are good, and there are a lot of good people and generous people. The farming family that give us the meat, they themselves probably 20 years ago were struggling, and they've made good, and they basically say that they want their growing up family to understand that it wasn't always easy for them, and that's why they're very generous towards us as well.
And that's Richard O'Connell, who is from St Vincent de Paul. It is 10 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A heat apocalypse is spreading across Europe. Several countries are experiencing their hottest days ever, and tens of thousands have had to flee amid devastating wildfires. Extreme heat warnings were issued in France and the UK, while northern Spain recorded temperatures up to 43 degrees. The BBC's Jessica Parker has more from southern France.
Into the forest and the front line of an exhausting battle. And one that today we were given special access to.
Up in the woods you can see guys tackling the fires. There's a huge amount of activity down here and it is hot, it is smoky. Just look at the haze in the trees.
The smoke thickens the further in we go. The flames suddenly all too apparent.
The fire rekindles in many places. We have to be very careful with these conditions. We're in a pine forest. The vegetation is so dry here, and with the temperatures, the fire reaches the top of the trees very quickly. Flames reach up to 80 meters high.
Along here, we were due to reach an evacuated campsite by the coast, but we never got there. Things were getting worse. You could see it on the ground and in the sky. Water bombers, one after the other, flying over our heads. They never stop here, they can't. But soon we, along with others, are told it's time to leave. Back on the main road, the thousands of evacuations were plain to see. Smoke means for many, it's just not safe to stay. Here at this centre, you can at least take a moment. Cool down.
It was very smoky this morning. It's very bad for the lungs. I knew there were problems coming, so I prepared a grab bag. Even the medications for my dogs were ready to go.
For some, it's a matter of frantic phone calls to find a place to sleep tonight. Who knows when they'll get to go home.
It can be in a few days, it can be in a few weeks. It's very difficult now to say, but we'll try to make people come back to their house as soon as possible.
France's wildfires seen from above are an alarming sight. Winds and over 40-degree heat made for a destructive mix today. Temperatures are set to drop tomorrow, and for these men, that can't come soon enough.
Meanwhile, the heatwave in Europe hasn't spared the UK, which is forecast to experience its hottest day ever today, topping 41 degrees. Extreme heat warnings are being issued and schools are having to either close early or not open at all. The BBC's Daniela Ralph has more.
Keeping cool any way possible. Normal, everyday life has had its challenges today. In central London, some still braved an open-top bus tour, while others cope with the intense city heat in a more traditional way.
We've had ice pops, we've had ice creams, we've had slushies, we've had smoothies, so a fair few drinks.
We've just taken on plenty of water, staying in the shade as much as we can, and just making sure having a wee dip, keeping the fluids up. So
well, we've got a lot of water inside, and I've been giving to them, pouring on their head, trying to make sure that they are active to be able to go around in the cities.
Engineers have been fixing the runway at Luton Airport where heat caused surface damage. Flights have now resumed after being suspended this afternoon. The parched landscapes of southern and eastern England vividly tell the story of this heatwave. The ground in Cambridge dry and brittle as the weather takes its toll. And these conditions come with risks. A 16-year-old lost his life here on Bray Lake near Maidenhead in Berkshire. He is the fourth person to die in recent days after getting into difficulty in open water. This evening, another teenager is missing in the River Thames at Richmond in Surrey.
There's a particular message, particularly for teenagers, children, some of those who may be tempted to go for a swim. There's significant dangers of that quite often when people go swimming in rivers when we have very hot weather.
For many, today has been about shifting the usual routine. This building site in Dagenham in Essex limited the amount of time teams worked outside.
Over in the Middle East, whether that be Dubai or anyone else, buildings are built. No one stops because of the sun. If anything, we'd rather work in these conditions than when it's raining.
And did you ever think of not working today?
And we gave the option for people not to work and not to come in this week and next week. And everybody said, no, of course not. The weather's not going to faze us. Building work still has to happen and it's not going to make a difference. So here we are.
A man remains in a critical condition tonight after being shot by police in the Auckland suburb of Grey Lynn. Police say the man was armed and shooting at his own empty house. Felix Walton reports.
Police were blocking the entrance to the central Auckland cul-de-sac this morning. Last night, Wallingford Street in Grey Lynn was the scene of gunfire from an armed man police say was firing at his own empty home, and from police who responded, shooting the 32-year-old man who they said raised his gun at them. This morning, officers lined a significant stretch of road, escorting residents in and out of their homes and turning outsiders away. Far behind them, a blue tent was covering the scene where the shooting took place. Residents walking their dogs said despite hearing gunshots, the full extent of last night's standoff went largely unnoticed.
No, it wasn't too scary, and then I had a phone call from the police to tell me to stay inside and stay away from the windows.
Well, Grey Lynn's full of crazies. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me at all.
Police have been amazing. I feel very safe.
But a man firing bullets into his own house is the last thing anyone expects on a Monday evening.
I don't think that's necessarily something that happens a lot in Grey Lynn.
It's a bit bizarre, to tell the truth. I wouldn't say I'm really upset about it. It's not like he's shooting somebody.
When neighbour Graham Gunthorpe heard the shots ring, he sprang into action.
Once we realised it was gunshots, we bundled the kids up pretty quick smart down to the basement. We didn't want to have anything to do with it, just wanted to get out of the way and let the police do their thing.
Other witnesses say police have advised them not to speak to media. With the investigation ongoing, locals are trying to understand what went on.
I'm a firearms owner myself, and I don't know why you'd do that.
Police plan to interview residents over the coming days and say there's no ongoing risk to the neighbourhood.
An American woman who was brutally attacked woke up after more than 2 years in a coma and named her brother as her attacker. The woman was left for dead in West Virginia. Her brother denies any involvement. CNN's Jean Caceres has more.
Daniel Palmer III was anything but cooperative as law enforcement tried to get him to jail after an initial court proceeding on Friday. Palmer of Jackson County, West Virginia, is now charged with the attempted murder of his sister Wanda in June of 2020, allegedly bludgeoning her with a hatchet or axe, according to the sheriff. It was Wanda's mother who called 911 after it happened.
They came Wednesday morning to mow her grass, and they found her in a big pool of blood, they said, and they run up on the hill real fast on a four-wheeler and told us, and I called the police and the ambulance.
Wanda was found in her living room.
We show up and we see her on the couch, bloodied, battered, bludgeoned in the head and face area.
They believed she was dead, but then heard sounds, quote, commonly referred to as the death rattle. But Wanda was alive.
I wouldn't have wagered a nickel for her life that morning. She was in that bad a shape.
According to the criminal complaint, a witness saw Wanda's brother at her trailer that night, and investigators say there was a history of violence between them. But law enforcement had no weapon, no eyewitness to the attack, and no phone records or video. And Wanda was in a coma until about 3 weeks ago when she woke up in her nursing home, the sheriff says. And she told investigators the attacker that night was her own brother.
For her to be able to wake up and say, give the name, thank God. That's all I can say, thank God.
This case is really about the perseverance and the toughness and the strength of the victim in itself.
To some of your feedback now, this on healthy homes and living conditions. Robin says huge gaps in windows and doors, no fixed heating, mould around the windowsills, despite wiping them every morning and airing rooms, cold and dark, guttering, growing weeds and dripping, so I can't get rid of the moss. No outdoor light, problems with the kitchen sink and drainage. Luckily, the price reflects these issues. Francis says it's chilly times at uni because students are in a tricky position renting, often only in the flats for a year at a time, and it doesn't seem worth taking any lack of heating or insulation to the tribunal because of that. We also live in fear of being blacklisted for next year's flats. But Natalie's got in touch and wants to give a shout out to Mrs. Robinson in Whangarei. I must have the best landlady in the land, reasonable rent, warm old house.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou. Ko Ivy Ashton tēnei. Torrential rain in Otago and Canterbury has forced homeowners and holidaymakers to evacuate, with floodwaters rushing through several small towns. The raging Ashburton and Rakaia rivers are flooding paddocks and roads. About a dozen homes were evacuated in Omarama and 50 people had to leave the holiday park when water swept through the area. Around 6 houses also flooded in nearby Otematata. Slips and washouts have closed roads and cut off access to Mount Cook and Lake Ohau near Twizel, trapping holidaymakers. Civil Defence staff are closely monitoring the Ashburton River in Canterbury, which has overflowed its banks in places. But the Ashburton Mayor, Neil Brown, says the town won't flood when the river peaks later this evening. The owner of a lodge at Lake Ohau says the wild weather forced him to go off-road to keep operations going. The only bridge into the Alpine village near Twizel has been washed out. Lake Ohau Lodge owner Mike Nielsen told Checkpoint the destroyed bridge meant he had to go cross-country while completing errands today.
Got close to it this morning and then took a diversion across country and got into Twizel to pick up our housekeepers and a bunch of laundry and came back same way. So I circumnavigated the disaster area.
Mike Nielsen says there are about 130 stranded holidaymakers staying at the lodge tonight. Wakakotahi says the Lindis and Haast passes, State Highway 6 between Omarama and Twizel, and the Aoraki Mount Cook Highway will remain closed overnight. It says people should delay any travel until tomorrow. Accommodation in places such as Twizel, Fairlie and Tekapo is filling up, with the arrival of travellers stalled by road closures. The Police Association says courts need to send a clear message about protecting officers following an alleged assault on a female officer in the South Auckland suburb of Manurewa on Monday. Video appears to show the officer being punched in the face by the offender, who was then tasered and apprehended. Jonty Dine reports.
It was vicious, brazen, and according to a police union member, all too common. The incident occurred at Great South Road in Manurewa just before 12:30 on Monday. A police spokesperson says the officer was knocked unconscious and is now off work recovering. President of the New Zealand Police Association, Chris Cahill, says the violence is raw to witness and questions how officers can protect the public when they aren't protected themselves. A 27-year-old man appeared in Counties Manukau District Court today, charged with intent to injure.
A lawyer for 20 would-be homeowners says it's fair his clients thought their builder lodged guarantee applications on their behalf. The families are planning legal action against the Master Builders Association after their builder, Jonesy Construction Limited, went bust. Ian Stevenson says his clients applied for non-completion cover, but the builder never lodged these applications. Mr Stevenson has told Checkpoint it would be better if people could lodge their applications directly with the association. A Northland hospital has closed a ward to visitors after a spike in the number of patients testing positive for COVID-19. Dargaville Hospital is the second in the region to temporarily close because of the virus. Raisa Almeida has more.
The closure comes just a week after Whangarei Hospital had to do the same. Dargaville Hospital Service Manager Jane Thomas says the plan to manage the outbreak was immediately initiated, including infection prevention control measures. She says closures are put in place when a contagious virus swells within a localized area. Northland has reported over 220 new cases each day this week.
National says the $44 million the government is giving to councils to help them transition to the new Three Waters model is a desperate bribe. The reforms shift drinking, waste and stormwater management from 67 councils to 4 mega entities. The government says it'll give each council $350,000 in recognition of the challenges they face. But National MP Simon Watts says throwing money at the problem won't make the reforms more popular and won't improve council services.
Communities and councils that I've spoken to said this is a desperate attempt to try and buy support and does not deal with the underlying issues that these councils have with this reform program.
The government argues the cost of the transition is dwarfed by the amount of investment needed to upgrade water infrastructure. Police have confirmed a Lincoln University student has died in their halls of residence in Canterbury. A spokesperson says a woman was found dead at an address on Ellesmere Junction Road yesterday evening. They say the death isn't considered suspicious and will be referred to the coroner. Lincoln University Vice-Chancellor Grant Edwards says the university is deeply saddened by the unexpected death and is working closely with the family. Student and staff communities are also being offered support. As a heatwave grips Europe, searing summer temperatures are expected to return to parts of China this week. Extreme heat is expected to last much longer than usual, through till late August. Patrick Falk reports from Beijing.
Following some respite over the weekend, scorching summer temperatures have returned to large swathes of China. According to China's Meteorological Administration, mercury levels are expected to hit between 39 and 42 degrees Celsius in Jiangxi, Zhejiang and Fujian province this week. Forecasters have also warned the sweltering conditions will last for an extended period of 40 days. For the past 2 weeks, the average temperature across the country has sat at around 35 degrees Celsius. It's buckled tarmac on roads and melted tiles on rooftops, and also meant more hospital visits as a result of heat stroke.
To sport, and former Australia captain Greg Chappell has added his voice to the calls for the lifting of the ban on David Warner holding a formal leadership role in Australian cricket. Warner was barred from holding any leadership position in the Australian game for life because of his leading role in the infamous Newlands ball tampering scandal of 2018. Current Test skipper Pat Cummins is among those who have called for the ban to be rescinded, saying he fundamentally disagrees with the concept of a ban that fails to recognise that people can learn and improve. The Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag has reiterated that he has no intention of selling striker Cristiano Ronaldo. United play Crystal Palace in a pre-season friendly in Melbourne tonight, with the Portuguese star having reportedly said he wants to leave the Old Trafford so he can play Champions League football. Ten Hag still expects Ronaldo to be playing for him when the season starts in a couple of weeks.
Clear, he's not for sale. I planned with him and I'm looking forward to work with him. But for the rest, I cannot say anymore because the situation is still the same as last week.
And true to his word, Australian golfer Cameron Smith has celebrated his British Open victory by filling the claret jug with beer. But it doesn't hold as much as you might think. Smith has revealed on social media that the trophy, which has been handed to winners since 1873, holds 2 cans of beer. In comparison, the Bledisloe Cup holds 25 cans. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's philosopher Anne Kerwin joins me to talk about character and the importance of what we care about. Not what we say we care about, but what in our daily living, prioritising and decision-making we actually care about. Tony Stamp is in with The Sampler, and we have a fantastic documentary on Soul Star, P.P. Arnold. That's Nights with me, Karen Hay, in for Brian Crump this week, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint shortly with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, rain or showers and thunderstorms are possible today, showers tomorrow. From Waikato to Taranaki, also for the Bay of Plenty, Taumarunui and Taupo, rain or showers, thunderstorms possible in Taranaki until dawn tomorrow. And for the Tongariro National Park, snow down to 1,100 metres tomorrow night. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Taihape, Whanganui and and Manawatu, high cloud today, periods of rain tomorrow with heavy falls in Gisborne. From Horowhenua to Wellington, showers turning to rain from the evening, strong or gale nor'westerlies easing this afternoon. For Bulla, Nelson, Westland and Marlborough except the Kaikoura coast, periods of rain with some heavy falls, clearing from southern Westland tomorrow. For the Kaikoura coast and for Canterbury, periods of rain easing to drizzle this evening, rain returning tomorrow evening and snow lowering to 600 metres inland. Fiordland, Southland and Otago, scattered rain or drizzle, especially north of Dunedin today, clearing from Fiordland tomorrow. And for Ruapehu, the Chatham Islands, often cloudy. Rain is developing tomorrow night. The time is 9 minutes past 6. I'll have the latest news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thanks, Evie. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. 4 Tories remain in the running to be the next British Prime Minister, with another round of voting to happen tonight. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, continues to lead the pack, enjoying the most support from his MPs. The BBC's Chris Mason has more.
Hubbub in a heatwave, democracy of sorts at dusk.
I have the results of the third ballot.
Round 3 of Conservative MPs deciding who they want and who they don't want to be our next Prime Minister.
So Tom Tugendhat is eliminated from the election. The other candidates are able to go forward to a 4th ballot, which will take place tomorrow.
Another defeated candidate, but this time not one willing to endorse anyone else, at least yet.
Well, thank you very much. That is the end of the road for me for this race. But look, it has been an amazing run. I'm incredibly proud of the team. I'm incredibly grateful to all the supporters who've been with me.
The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak is still the front-runner, nearly doubling his lead over second place Penny Mordaunt, who actually lost a vote compared with round 2.
Good morning.
The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss finished 3rd again, narrowing the gap to Penny Mordaunt.
Morning.
And here's who finished 4th, Kemi Badenoch, on her way this morning to try to drum up more support.
I'm going to be fighting hard for every single vote, and I'm not taking anything for granted, but I'm optimistic. Thank you.
While Tory MPs voted upstairs, downstairs in the Commons chamber, the start of Boris Johnson's parliamentary swan song. Defeated but demob happy, pointing out he crushed Labour.
We sent the great blue Tory ferret so far up their left trouser leg they couldn't move. We won the biggest Conservative victory since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. We won seats they never dreamed of losing.
Despite knowing that he'd been fired from job after job for lying, they elected him to lead their party. And he behaved exactly as everyone feared when he got into Downing Street. He lurched from one scandal to the next.
Let's reflect on a man who should never have been put in office in the first place. A man that simply shouldn't be here for a minute longer because he demonstrated no dignity in office, in the highest office in the land.
And incidentally, what does an outgoing Prime Minister ejected by his own side do while waiting for his replacement? Well, he appears to be enjoying some of the perks of high office, filming himself as a passenger in a warplane being refuelled mid-air.
With its head of state now gone, political leaders are scrambling to keep the Sri Lankan government and the country afloat. The country is dealing with an unprecedented economic crisis and a popular uprising. In Colombo, Deutsche Welle's Manira Chowdhury met activists experiencing the upheaval firsthand.
For Manuri Pabasari, the golf face area in the heart of Colombo has become a second home. A lecturer and social activist, she has been involved in the action from the start.
Prior to this all-street protest, actually then we voice out through social media against the Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the government. We criticize it and post in some posts and also the writing for the newspapers. But actually we understand that's not enough. So then because of then we understand and we need to do some more than that.
Manuri has seen the early protests grow into a mass movement that ultimately pushed President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his brothers out of power. The trigger for the demonstrations was the economic crisis that left people scrambling for essentials such as fuel, cooking gas, medicines and even food. The future course of Sri Lanka's politics and governance is being charted right now in the parliament. What people want is a new government and a leader who can pull them out of this financial crisis and bring an end to the daily struggles they have been facing for long. Rajapaksa's exit has left a political vacuum. People are cautiously optimistic about what might come next.
With the system change, we expect some sort of stability, some semblance of stability to be ushered in. However, that remains to be seen. But we have hopes.
They have to establish trust that they will resolve our basic needs. We don't know when electricity is coming. We don't know when next fuel shipment is coming. We are tired, as people are tired of looking into this failed leadership.
With this change of the political leadership, which caused most of the chaos in the country, I hope a new set of leaders, a new vision and a new country, new people can resolve this altogether.
But the struggle is not over yet. Manuri still comes to talk to fellow protesters about the way forward.
Struggle will continue because the thing is we still not find the solution for the issues from this country. The government need to understand and government need to address that. So till they address it, yes, we are still continuing this protest.
Manuri says she has grown as a person and has formed lasting friendships. She knows there's a long road ahead and a lot still to be done.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Doctors across the US are rallying around a colleague in Indiana who performed an abortion for a 10-year-old rape victim. More than $500,000 has been donated to an online campaign to cover legal fees and security for the woman who's been the subject of various threats. CNN's Alexandra Field has this report.
Dr. Caitlin Bernard, the physician who provided an abortion in Indiana for a 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio.
There are many people who live in places where there is no access to abortion care.
Now at the center of a national firestorm, but she and her family have been the target of threats before. The Guardian first to report that in a 2021 court case concerning abortion restrictions in Indiana, Dr. Bernard testified she had stopped performing first trimester abortions in South Bend in 2020 because of kidnapping threats made against her daughter. Her spokesperson confirming the report and adding the fact that Dr. Bernard continues to provide critical reproductive care even after she has received these threats just shows the depth of her compassion and commitment as a physician. Anti-abortion activists in an organization with ties to Justice Amy Coney Barrett before she was nominated to the Supreme Court have even published some of the doctor's personal information online. But earlier this month, Dr. Bernard spoke to CNN about continuing to provide abortion care for people living in states where they can no longer get it.
You know, these laws are created without any consideration for medical necessity, for, these are created by lawmakers and not by doctors. And abortion is healthcare and needs to stay in that area.
She is now the target of an investigation by the Indiana Attorney General into whether she properly reported providing an abortion for the 10-year-old rape victim who traveled to Indianapolis after Ohio banned abortions around 6 weeks. That investigation continues despite public filings showing Dr. Bernard did report the procedure to the Indiana Department of Health within the required time frame. The controversy over the case erupting after conservative media and certain lawmakers doubted the rape had happened until the rape suspect confessed to the crime. In a statement, Planned Parenthood says these lawmakers are using a 10-year-old's tragedy as an excuse to intimidate abortion providers and scare them out of providing legal, safe health care. Their cruelty knows no limits. The organization says it's committed to providing security for Dr. Bernard and helping cover her legal fees.
Dr. Bernard is amazingly strong, and I will tell you that she has been a fierce advocate in reproductive health for years. This is not new for her. It's not a new space for her. But this last week is the first time I personally have been nervous for her safety.
Dr. Tracy Wilkinson, a pediatrician, authored a piece on what she calls the chilling effect of abortion bans on medicine for the New York Times. Its title, Dr. Caitlin Bernard was meant to write this with me before she was attacked for doing her job.
I've heard from physicians all over Indiana, all over the country, that are terrified that they could be the next Dr. Bernard. And that is not something that anybody wishes on anybody.
For the first time since January in Australia, there are more than 5,000 COVID patients in hospital, and several states and territories are currently experiencing record numbers. And with the peak not having yet been reached, people with disabilities are urging the government to ease the crisis. The ABC's Annie Guest reports.
As health workers warn of overloaded hospitals, disability advocate Nigel Webb is increasingly worried.
I have cerebral palsy and have a young family, 2 daughters and my wife, so I'm at risk of not getting access to required supports and treatment. So they're primary concerns of many of my peers as well as myself.
When carers come to Nigel Webb's home, he can often provide a rat test with the help of a free scheme for concession card holders that comes to an end in 2 weeks. In a statement to AM, the Federal Health Department says test kits are available in other ways, including in Victoria, New South Wales and Western Australia, where free kits are on offer. Regardless, Nigel Webb wants the decision reversed.
I would encourage government to consider it because it does mitigate some of the risk to the person with a disability. Hospitals are already oversubscribed already. So the last place I want to go as a person with a disability right now is into a hospital setting because the likelihood of me being exposed to additional complications goes up by probably a factor of 10.
Doctors and nurses unions are reporting rising pressure in hospitals across the country, and Western Australia, South Australia and the ACT now have their highest number of COVID patients since the pandemic began. Victoria is taking steps to expand a virtual emergency ward to help ease the load. Associate Professor James Trower is the head of epidemiological modelling at Monash University.
We haven't seen the peak of cases. That's probably coming in the next few weeks, and the peak of hospitalisations will come after that, which is going to be really hard work for the health system.
The Queensland Health Minister yesterday expressed frustration at modelling which she said hadn't predicted the state would have 1,000 COVID patients now. Dr Trower says more testing for COVID strains would help as BA5 replaces BA2.
But we should know really exactly what proportion of cases out in the community are BA5, and that will really help us work out when the peak of this current wave is coming.
Another piece of information he says is vital is knowing how many older people have had their 3rd and 4th vaccine doses.
When we're in an endemic state, that means that immunity is the main thing that will protect us from very high levels of hospitalisation and strain on the health service. And there's much more we could be doing to get high coverage of vaccination in elderly groups and aged care residents in particular.
The Federal Aged Care Minister, Annika Wells, met providers yesterday and discussed the rollout of 4th doses.
The war in Ukraine has left many nations vulnerable to food insecurity. In Zimbabwe, the issue has been compounded by maize production plummeting by 43% this year due to long dry spells. It's now seeking to import maize as well as find alternative sources for wheat and fertiliser that usually come from Russia and Ukraine. But ancient knowledge may offer a solution. The BBC's Shingai Nayoko travelled to northeast Zimbabwe to find out more.
Despite a near disastrous agricultural season, one family has plenty of grain to process. Mudzi, a hot semi-arid region, had erratic rainfall, but as farmer Love Moshoshe explains, his sorghum cereal crop defied the odds.
We planted a sizable maize crop, as well as sorghum and millet. But we got nothing from the maize. It was scorched after there was no rain for 3 months. We harvested just the traditional grains.
About 10 kg each. Farmer Lovemore's wife, Rose Karina, showed me her entire maize harvest, a few cobs in a small black pot. They sunk 10 kilograms of seed and 100 kilograms of fertilizer for this. She then pointed to sacks of sorghum grain, over a ton harvested from just 5 kilograms of seed and fertilizer. She said she wouldn't be planting maize again. The women sweep up the chaff spat out by the threshing machine. Many more farmers are now also attracted to traditional grains because processing it is no longer as labour-intensive.
People prefer to grow maize because it's easier to process after, that is harvesting. When you are processing these small grains, they used to spend more than even 2 months. But because of these machines now, the work that was done in 3 months can be done in about an hour.
Sorghum flour is mixed with water and stirred until it stiffens. Maize is less nutritious, but since the colonial era, it has become the staple as well as a cash crop. With increasingly erratic seasons, the majority of maize harvests have failed and left Zimbabwe needing to rely on imports to meet the shortfall. The country also sources 2/3 of its fertilizer imports from Russia.
I think it certainly is a reset in the sense of really looking at how do we rethink how the continent feeds itself.
Mia Sepo, the UN Development Programme's representative in Zimbabwe, believes recent global food security shocks could make a case for change. The programme's Resilience Building Fund initiative has helped 200,000 farmers grow ancient grains, and over 90% are now food sufficient.
I don't have the crystal ball, but if you look at what we know today in terms of climate impact, in terms of the war on Ukraine and the disrupted supply chains, and if you just look at the need for a nation and a continent to be self-reliant and for community-level resilience, then that is the way to go.
At a busy market in Harare, multiple stalls offer food as far as the eye can see. Various beans, sorghum and millet poured out from sacks, but there's very little maize or wheat. One vendor explains why.
Before the Russia war, we used to sell tons of maize and wheat a week. Now it's hard to sell anything because people find it expensive. We used to buy wheat for $3 to $4 a bucket. Now it's $10 to $15, and we sell it for $15 to $20. Our business is affected because clients are poor and can't afford it.
There are fears that food security could worsen in future. Raw materials for fertilizer have tripled in price since January, and fuel and maize seed prices are also up. But there's new hope that traditional crops could boost local food security by reducing the reliance on imports and by beating potential weather shocks.
Jury selection has been taking place for the trial of a former top advisor to Donald Trump, Steve Bannon. He's facing 2 criminal charges for his failure to comply with the House investigation into the Capitol riot. Mr Bannon is expected to deliver explosive testimony, as CNN's Sarah Murray reports.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
A trial Steve Bannon hoped to avoid.
This is going to be the misdemeanor from hell.
The judge meticulously asking potential jurors today if they've watched the January 6th committee hearings during a slow-moving process to find 22 impartial jurors. Bannon was charged with 2 counts of criminal contempt of Congress after defying a subpoena for documents and testimony from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. The Trump ally pleaded not guilty.
I'm never going to back down.
And hammered the committee.
Their ratings stink and they can't compete with the trial of Bannon.
And damaging to our House investigators wanted to know about Bannon's communications with Trump in the run-up to January 6th. His inflammatory comments the day before the insurrection.
All hell is going to break loose. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in.
As well as his communications with extremist groups like the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and 3 Percenters. Since that subpoena, new revelations about Bannon's political activity in 2020, as new audio from Mother Jones shows Bannon correctly predicting Trump would declare victory in 2020, regardless of the outcome.
What Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner.
Steve Bannon is an agent of chaos. Steve Bannon, in his own words, believes you have to basically burn the system down to rebuild it and fix it.
Staring down jail time if convicted, Bannon made an 11th-hour offer to the committee to testify publicly.
I think we'd have been more productive if we'd been on Capitol Hill in front of open mics
addressing the nation with exactly all this nonsense, this show trial they've been putting up on Capitol Hill.
But the move didn't stop his trial, which is shaping up to be a key test of the committee's subpoena power as it negotiates to bring in additional witnesses.
A lot of feedback from you on healthy homes or a lack of it. This listener says problems with cold and damp, mildew on the curtains, no heat pump. This is a house we own. We wear a beanie to bed if we have to. And another listener says our rental still isn't compliant. 7 months into our tenancy, all progress has required multiple emails and phone calls. We are now looking to move and go to the tribunal. And Ray with some pragmatic thoughts. The weather's glooming, the hospitals are gloomy, the economy is gloomy, the interest rates are gloomy, the All Blacks are gloomy, but there is a bright spot, says Ray. The fuel subsidy is remaining. Must be thankful for small mercies, says Ray. That is about all we have time for. Don't forget, the Late News team will keep you updated throughout the evening. If you missed anything from the program, you can always find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. Tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up has a great little story about a nurse who started up a clinic in a school principal's office so residents of an isolated town can get the treatment they need. Kei te hoki mai anō a pōpō whānau, pō Mario. Have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The raging Ashburton and Rakaia rivers are flooding paddocks and roads in Canterbury, and flooding in Otago and Canterbury has forced some homeowners and holidaymakers to evacuate. The Police Association says courts need to send a clear message about protecting officers following an alleged assault on a female officer in the South Auckland suburb of Manurewa on Monday. And a Northland hospital is the second in the region to close a ward to visitors after a spike in the number of patients testing positive for COVID-19 at Dargaville Hospital. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
In January, the eruption of Honga Tonga Honga'apai triggered a tsunami of unprecedented proportions. On this week's Our Changing World, science communicator Ellen Rikers speaks to scientists who've been puzzling over this rare phenomenon.
There's a whole lot of different ways that a volcano can generate a tsunami.
Follow Our Changing World on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or iHeart, or join me, Claire Kincannon, Thursdays and nights, just after the 9 o'clock news on RNZ National.
Thank you very much, Claire. Karen Hay in for Brian Crump tonight, and coming up after 7, Knights philosopher Anne Kerwin joins me to talk about character and the importance of what we care about. It's not what we say we care about, not what we tell our children or our friends that we care about, or not what we would like to believe that we care about, but what in our daily living, our prioritising and our decision-making we actually care about. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to Anne about that and to break it down. And do we start with a list? Anne's with us after the news at 7. First, though, has COVID-19 been a death knell for CBDs? Vacant shop fronts litter Auckland's Queen Street, but there's optimism it can be brought back to life. Sharon Brett Kelly has the detail.
Widely regarded as the most beautiful avenue in the